to The Dark Truth, where we dive deep into the origins of the vampire myth. Today, we're revealing the mysterious beginnings of these legendary creatures of the night. Vampires have haunted our collective imagination for millennia. But where did the legend truly begin? Our journey will take us across continents, through ancient civilizations, and into the heart of darkness. We'll explore how the vampire myth evolved and endured, transforming from a symbol of fear and superstition into an enduring icon of horror fiction. We begin our journey in ancient Mesopotamia around 4000 BC, where the Akkadians, Sumerians, and Babylonians believed in the Akimu. The Akimu were restless spirits of the dead, often returning from the grave to torment the living by drinking their blood. These spirits were malevolent, seeking vengeance for improper burial rituals or wrongs committed against them in life. The Akimu is one of the earliest examples of the vampire archetype, an undead being that returns to life to feed on the living. This concept of the restless dead would influence many cultures, becoming a recurring theme in vampire lore across the world. Middle Eastern influence. Moving to other parts of the Middle East, we encounter the legend of Lilith, a figure from Jewish mythology who is often depicted as a vampiric entity. According to some traditions, Lilith was Adam's first wife, who refused to submit to him and was cast out of Eden. She became a demoness, preying on newborn infants and seducing men, drawing their lifeblood. The influence of Lilith spread throughout the Middle East and into Europe, where she was sometimes merged with the idea of the succubus, a demon that preys on men at night, draining their life force. This concept would later contribute to the seductive, dangerous female vampires we see in modern fiction. Europe, Ancient Greece. Our next stop is ancient Greece, where the Empusa, a demonic being serving the goddess Hecate, is found. Empusa was said to have one leg of brass and another of a donkey, with a monstrous hunger for human blood. She was believed to seduce men in their sleep, drinking their blood and devouring their flesh. Roman influence. Moving into Roman times, we find the Strix, a nocturnal bird woman that fed on human flesh and blood. The Strix was feared across the Roman Empire and was often used to explain sudden deaths and mysterious illnesses, particularly among infants and children. The Romans believed that these creatures could curse families, bringing death and misfortune. The influence of the Strix was so pervasive that it even found its way into Roman legal texts. Laws were enacted to protect children from these creatures, showing just how deeply rooted the fear of vampires was in ancient society. The idea of a blood-drinking creature that could spread curses would later influence medieval European vampire lore. Medieval Europe. In medieval Europe, vampire myths began to take on a more recognizable form. The Slavic Upir, for example, was a vampire-like creature believed to rise from the dead and feast on the living. These vampires were often depicted as bloated and dark-skinned, their bodies filled with the blood of their victims. Villagers believed that these vampires could be identified by corpses that did not decompose or had fresh blood on their lips. The fear of vampires in medieval Europe was so intense that it influenced burial practices. Corpses suspected of being vampires were often buried with protective measures, such as a brick in their mouths or a stake driven through their hearts. In some cases, bodies were exhumed and burned to prevent them from rising again. Eastern Europe and the Balkans. In Eastern Europe, particularly in the Balkans, vampire legends were especially vivid and detailed. The Nosferatu, Vrikolakas, and other local names for vampires were used to describe creatures that haunted the night, preying on the living. These vampires were often seen as carriers of disease, bringing plagues to entire villages. In the Balkans, the vampire legend was deeply connected to local beliefs about the afterlife and the soul. It was believed that those who died suddenly, violently, or without proper rites could return as vampires. The idea that a soul could become trapped in the body, unable to move on, created a strong fear of the dead. Southeast Asia, China. In East Asia, vampire-like creatures took on different forms. In China, the jiangshi was a reanimated corpse that sucked the life force, or qi, from the living. The jiangshi was depicted as a stiff, hopping corpse, often dressed in ancient clothing and moving by hopping with outstretched arms. They were said to drain their victims of life energy, causing death or turning them into another jiangshi. The jiangshi is often depicted in Chinese folklore as a mindless creature, driven only by its hunger for life force. However, there are variations where the jiangshi retains some of its human memories and emotions, making it a tragic figure similar to Western vampires. The fear of the dead returning to life is a common theme, reflecting cultural anxieties about death, burial practices, and the afterlife. Japan. In Japan, we find the Nukukubi, a creature whose head detaches from its body to fly around at night, attacking people and drinking their blood. This terrifying image of a floating, disembodied head is a unique twist on the vampire myth. The Nukukubi is often depicted as a woman who appears normal by day, but transforms into a monster by night. The Nukukubi's ability to separate its head from its body ties into broader Japanese beliefs about spirits and the separation of the soul from the body. In Japanese folklore, the separation of body parts often signifies a loss of control or humanity, turning the individual into something monstrous. The Philippines. In the Philippines, the aswang is a shape-shifting monster that often takes the form of a bat, a dog, or a pig to hunt its prey. Aswangs are feared for their ability to transform and their preference for consuming human flesh and blood. They are especially feared for preying on pregnant women and unborn children, a theme that ties into cultural anxieties about fertility and childbirth. The aswang is often depicted as living among humans during the day, blending in with society and only revealing its true form at night. This duality of appearance plays into fears of betrayal and hidden dangers, making the aswang a particularly terrifying figure in Filipino folklore. Africa, West Africa. In West African folklore, the Adze is a vampiric creature that can take the form of a firefly. It is believed to possess humans, particularly children, and drink their blood. The Adze is considered a malevolent spirit, often associated with witchcraft and sorcery. It is said that the Adze can enter homes through small cracks and keyholes, making it nearly impossible to keep out. The Adze is feared not only for its blood-drinking tendencies, but also for its ability to bring misfortune and disease to those it possesses. This association with illness and death ties into broader African beliefs about the spiritual causes of disease, where malevolent spirits or witches are often blamed for unexplained illnesses. Southern Africa. In Southern Africa, the Impundulu, or lightning bird, is a vampiric creature that serves witches. It is believed to take the form of a large bird and can summon lightning and thunder. The Impundulu is also said to drink the blood of its victims, acting as a familiar or servant to witches who use it to harm their enemies. The Impunlu is often associated with power and destruction, embodying the fear of natural disasters and their unexplained origins. Its role as a servant to witches also highlights the complex relationship between vampires and witchcraft in African folklore, where both are often seen as sources of malevolent power. The Americas, South America. In South American folklore, the chupacabra is a creature that is said to drain the blood of livestock, particularly goats. The chupacabra, whose name means goat sucker in Spanish, is described as a reptilian or canine creature with spines down its back. It is often blamed for mysterious livestock deaths across the continent, particularly in rural areas. The chupacabra legend emerged in the late 20th century and quickly spread across the Americas, becoming a symbol of fear and the unknown. Unlike traditional vampires, which prey on humans, the chupacabra targets animals, reflecting the importance of the livestock to rural communities and the anxiety surrounding their protection. North America. In North American native cultures, the skinwalker is a shapeshifter that can take the form of animals, including wolves and coyotes, to prey on humans. While not a traditional vampire, the skinwalker shares many characteristics with vampiric creatures, such as its ability to transform and its association with witchcraft and evil. The skinwalker legend is deeply rooted in Navajo culture, where it is believed that certain witches can take on the form of animals to harm others. The fear of the skinwalker ties into broader themes of taboo, power, and the dangers of breaking cultural norms. Caribbean and Central America. In the Caribbean, particularly in Haitian folklore, the loup-garou is a vampiric witch who can shed her skin and fly at night, draining the blood of her victims. The loup-garou is similar to the European vampire, but is also connected to witchcraft and the use of magic. This figure is often seen as a woman who has made a pact with the devil, trading her soul for power. The loup-garou is often depicted as an old woman who hides her true nature from the community, much like the witch in European folklore. At night, she sheds her skin and flies through the night, searching for victims to drain of blood. This narrative ties into broader Caribbean beliefs about the dangers of hidden evil and the power of magic. The 20th and 21st centuries have seen a dramatic evolution in the depiction of vampires, influenced by literature, cinema, and popular culture. One of the earliest and most influential vampire films is F.W. Murnau's Nosferatu, 1922, an unauthorized adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula. Despite legal battles, Nosferatu introduced the iconic image of the vampire as a gaunt, rat-like creature with long fingers and a terrifying presence. The Hammer horror films of the 1950s and 60s, featuring Christopher Lee as Dracula, further cemented the vampire's place in popular culture. These films combined Gothic horror with a more visceral and graphic depiction of vampirism, influencing countless subsequent horror films. The image of Dracula as a charming, aristocratic vampire was solidified during this era, creating a lasting archetype. Modern literature and cinema. Anne Rice's The Vampire Chronicles, beginning with Interview with a Vampire, 1976, introduced a new level of psychological and emotional complexity to the vampire myth. Rice's vampires are introspective and tormented, grappling with issues of immortality, morality, and existential dread. This marked a significant shift from the traditional depiction of vampires as purely evil creatures. The Twilight series by Stephen E. Meyer brought vampires to a new generation of fans, focusing on the romantic and supernatural aspects of vampirism. Meyer's vampires, who sparkle in sunlight and possess unique abilities, presented a departure from traditional vampire lore. Twilight became a cultural phenomenon, especially among young adults, influencing a wave of supernatural romance novels and films. Television and video games. The late 20th and early 21st centuries also saw a rise in vampire-themed television shows, such as Buffy the Vampire Slayer, True Blood, and The Vampire Diaries. These shows brought vampires into the mainstream, exploring themes of identity, redemption, and the struggle between good and evil. Each show offered a unique take on vampire lore, reflecting contemporary cultural issues and anxieties. Video games have also embraced vampire mythology, offering players immersive experiences that explore the dark and complex nature of these creatures. Games like Castlevania Vampire and The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim allow players to interact with the vampire lore in unique ways, making choices that affect their character's morality and fate. Conclusion. Vampires have a rich and varied history that spans cultures and centuries. From ancient Mesopotamia to modern Hollywood, the vampire myth has proven to be incredibly resilient and adaptable. These creatures of the night have captivated our imaginations, reflecting our deepest fears, desires, and cultural anxiety. Whether depicted as monstrous revenants or tragic anti-heroes, vampires continue to hold a powerful place in our collective consciousness. As we look to the future, vampire stories will likely continue to evolve, reflecting the changing fears and fascinations of society. With advancements in technology and storytelling, new forms of media will offer innovative ways to explore the vampire myth. From virtual reality to interactive storytelling, the dark allure of the vampire will continue to inspire new generations of creators and audiences. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more dark truths revealed. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the dark truth of vampire origins. Until next time, stay curious and stay spooky.